A bipartisan delegation led by Foreign Minister Penny Wong has begun its Pacific tour with a Vanuatu visit. As we heard a little earlier, Australia has signed a new bilateral security agreement with the island nation. The Albanese government is hoping to enhance regional ties with the Pacific amid growing influence from China, which entered a controversial security pact with the Solomon Islands in April.
We see our responsibility as partner, as a member of the Pacific family, to work with Vanuatu on its priorities.
Joining me for more on this trip and its significance, Dr. Graeme Smith with the Department of Pacific Affairs at ANU. Thanks very much for your time. I guess the first thing, these bipartisan visits with the coalition along as well, the opposition in this case, how rare is that and what does it say about the importance right now?
Look, they used to be very common, and it's something that under Maurice Payne basically stopped happening, like quite a few other things. So, you know, the tradition goes back a long way. We haven't had one for a few years, but, you know, we're not going back to ancient history. And I think it's a really important thing to see revived because we saw, you know, political fighting over foreign affairs at the last election. I don't think that's very healthy for Australia, especially if we're, you know, serious about geo-strategic competition, as we say we are.
I guess the important message as we're doing these deals is we both believe in this. You know, that's what the nations are hearing. The deal with Vanuatu, look, it's a country, I suppose, is it fair to say, very welcoming of Australia's help, given the crippling cyber attacks on the nation, which presumably were done by enemies of the West?
Look, they're saying everyone's saying very tight-lipped about who it might have been. Certainly, there are people in Indonesia people in Vanuatu who are pointing to Indonesia because of Vanuatu's long-standing support for the West Papua cause. But at this stage, no one is confirming anything.
I guess that's often the case. What do you make of the deal, though? Because it does stand in stark contrast to what we've seen with the Solomon Islands. Is this Vanuatu picking Australia and you know, its allied nations, for want of a better description?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, Vanuatu is a very long-term and committed member of the non-aligned movement. Indeed, when 60 Minutes did that big story about the Luganville Wharf that was supposedly going to become a Chinese base, he was actually, Ralph Reaganvani, the foreign minister, was actually at a meeting of the non-aligned movement at that stage. So this has been in the pipeline for a while. It's certainly something Australia was keen to see, and it's taken some time. But I think that's a good thing that this wasn't rushed and both sides, you know, had long-term input. And I think because you have a new government in Vanuatu, it's also very significant to sort of, on both sides, to say it doesn't matter who's in power, this partnership is getting stronger.
We always look at this, I guess, from an Australian point of view. We think of ourselves as the good guys, again, for want of a better description. What about from the position of some of the Pacific nations? So there's Vanuatu, Palau, Micronesia. They see these visits. Is it sort of, do they see us as opportunistic at all? Do they think that even if our motive's a little bit self-interested, that we're taking more of an interest and this is the time to sort of cash in and get some of that development they desperately need?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. For a lot of people, I think myself included, we're pretty agnostic about why Australia is taking more interest in the region, along with New Zealand and all the other metropolitan powers, for want of a better word. But yeah, there are certainly some people in the Pacific who are fairly cynical about, you know, you ignored us for decades, and suddenly here you are because China's taking a bit of an interest. Case in point with Vanuatu, until a couple of years ago, the last state visit by a Vanuatu leader to Australia was in 1994. So we really weren't looking after the, you know, kind of the high-level visit side of things at all until fairly recently. So, yeah, it's a welcome development. You know, some people aren't happy about it, but others are pragmatic and saying, look, you know, we need help on climate change, on labour mobility, and on education. And if China's the thing that's made it happen, then well and good.
And just finally on the Solomon Islands, a lot of attention recently with Chinese police over there, training up locals in terms of policing ability. I guess to play devil's advocate, isn't that what we do in the region too? Is there anything going on a bit more with China? Do we always assume it's some sort of deep state reach?
Look, the police or the Chinese police that have stayed behind in the Solomon Islands, in many ways, the biggest concern, I think, should be if you're a Chinese business person based in the Solomon Islands, because a large part of the work of these police will be keeping an eye on Chinese nationals in the Solomon Islands. So, you know, the concern for me, I mean, the real concern is when you start to see competition that leads to, for example, recently we gave 60 semi-automatic weapons to the Solomon Islands police, partly in response to China giving support. Now, the whole reason we had trouble in the Solomon Islands was that the police got some serious guns in their hands and released them to the militias. So, you know, semi-automatic weapons rarely bring peace. And I think this is the sort of help we should be shying away from.
Yep, interesting. All right, look, a region that we're increasingly taking notice of, Dr. Graeme Smith, I know you do all the time. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Tom.